start. And I'm on this agenda that I have, um, and we're going to have to, just so people are involved, that we've got sitting with us somebody from Granby, the schools. We've got someone from McDuffie, and so we have, starting with the Granby schools. Next comes McDuffie, then our search for a Board of Health clerk. I do have items that, Herb, maybe you and I can do right away, is Jean's timesheet that we
Yes.
just have to okay.
Yes, I thought it was fine.
Okay, so that's done. We'll have to set our next meeting date. And Al and I were just talking about all power, but that's the last item. So we're gonna have to, this is a brief meeting today. So the Nancy is, I see Nancy is on there, although she's muted, I think, right now. But I had some comments on, I looked at the schools. I'm not sure whether the school is asking us to support it or the proposal, but I had actually 7 different comments. One is, I think that the two very, very serious areas in terms of propagation of this disease. One is the ventilation, and McDuffie, in fact, has hired, when we get to them, has hired an engineering company skilled in ventilation. And what I saw presented in the school plan is terribly, terribly inadequate to protect our students. The second is, we know that this disease is spread based on one of the things is ventilation. One of them is close proximity. One of them is being indoors. One, and the other is what's happening with your mouth. That if your mouth is open and eating, where velocity of air is higher, is a worse chance of propagation of this, or transmission of this disease. So singing, speaking loudly, and so eating becomes a horrible exposure area. And the school is kind of touched it in the middle school, or in the East Meadow, but in the high school, which I've lived in, is basically saying we're going to use the cafetorium and we're going to be eating there, without really a detailed plan on how they're going to reduce that exposure and understanding the ventilation. I don't see that there's any plan that the schools have presented to take advantage of the fact that being outside and teaching outside is a very, very high payoff exposure reducer of this disease. I don't see that there's any particular plan that takes advantage of the fact that it appears that with this ACE2 receptor that's not developed in young kids, I don't see anything that says we're going to split this education based on under 10-year-old versus over 10-year-old. I don't see a proactive a testing plan that uses testing to predict, and really like a prophylactic plan that says we're going to use that to our advantage instead of being a reactive plan. one of the questions that I did see is a statement that says that in many cases, that when children are required to get tested, that they make note that they may have to have a referral to be able to get tested. And I see nothing in their plan that uses a doctor under the control of the school system to give that referral. It just appears to say, hey, Kyle, go get tested and figure out how you're going to get permission to get it done. And the final issue, and I may have just missed it, is as they look at multiple cases and the mode they move into if there's multiple cases of the disease, I don't see anything where they go and say, we're going to instruct children to be tested. And it looks like they're assuming they're going to get some test results, but they also say if children don't want to get tested, they can then stay home for I'll call it the 2 weeks. But I don't see that if they go into the mode that says, gee, a kid chose not to be tested, does that by definition move them into a multiple case scenario? And I didn't see that list of or a scenario presented. So those are my issues. And when I looked at it, they're certainly not answers that we can get right now. But if the school is asking us, or the school department asking me, Dick Bombardier, a member of the Board of Health, to support this plan as being adequate to protect the children, I can't support that. And that's my few minutes worth. Herb, what is your thought?
Well, my thoughts are included somewhere in the comment. I think we've not heard nearly enough about HVAC issues, particularly in the high school. We've not heard anything about what you alluded to as outside teaching. At least I don't recall hearing it. And yet that was, I think, a pretty successful strategy 100 years ago when the terrible flu outbreak was terrorizing the country. And that was used in New England, by the way, as I'm sure you know. And kids were provided with blankets and they had coats, and instruction went on outside. So if in fact our junior senior high school doesn't have sufficient HVAC to allow instruction, then I think that's an alternative.
So Nancy, I don't know whether you're the spokesman or are you, or John, and is it so far it looks like, Nancy, you've passed things to Herb as compared with going directly to the Board of Health. Herb has been good enough to make sure that the Board of Health is fully, and the rest of the members of the board are fully informed that what you're passing to him. But are you guys looking for something from the Board of Health that says we feel this is adequate?
So first, to clarify the protocol plan, we were given guidance by the Department of Secondary Education. So a lot of the information that is on there is directly from DESE. In terms of prophylactic testing and whatnot, that was not given, we were not given any guidance from the state regarding that. So I just wanted to make sure that you were clear I was clear about that. You do address some other things that we can take a look at. In terms of referrals for students for testing, the state expectation is they would go to their own healthcare provider and get a referral to be tested. Because our school physician is also a working pediatrician in the area who's not on site to give those referrals. But we are looking for, your input and support in this plan, so that if we do end up having issues or just working on the changing climate with how COVID has been, that we can work collaboratively together.
Okay. Did you get all of our records?
Oh, so at least you should understand that we believe that the ventilation plan and the eating plan are woefully inadequate. So, and unfortunately, as I explained to Herb at some point, that having some expertise in ventilation is that when we say, gee, this is a modern school at East Meadow. So we have two things. We've got a whatever 70-year-old, I guess it's not 70 years old, but it's a 60-year-old high school. And we've got a rebuilt East Meadow School. But when you start looking at modern systems and say, boy, this is a right up to the date modern system, and find out that most modern systems are at least set up to be energy efficient systems, that the good ones are starting to look at carbon dioxide concentration and adjust fans and make up air to maintain carbon dioxide levels, and all to save money and energy. And when you look at this situation, is driving you in the very opposite direction. So just by saying, gee, we've got an up-to-date system, someone's got to look and say, well, does that up-to-date system have the ability to add a whole bunch more dilution air and work to our advantage right now? But once again, as skilled as I believe John is, and I do believe that John is a capable guy, he's not a guy with a stamp that says, I understand the regulations and I've got a degree in this and a certification in it. And I think in this case, that's what you need. See your finger, John. It wasn't your middle one. That's a good thing. It was your index.
So let me just try to get this quickly out of the way here. So I'm going to talk, this is about East Meadow itself. So I have Colliers, who is an engineering firm, to come in next Thursday to perform a functionality test, make sure all the units are performing the way they were designed. I've sat and talked with but on the phone we've talked. I need 15 CFM per person of outside air. So I calculated 15 people in a room, which is a.
Now, who specified that, John?
Colliers, the engineering firm. Okay. You know, and this is just, this is just preliminary right now. But 15 people in a room in a normal classroom at 15 CFM per person, I have 225 CFM needed. So right now, I'm on my system right now. So I'm going to pick just a standard classroom size. The one we have set up that was on the GCAM the other night, classroom 25. So right now I have 860 CFM going through that room.
I'm going to have to, okay, let's not do that. This is an engineering then we've moved into an engineering discussion, but
Okay.
again, someone with a stamp.
Okay, so I
As
have
the
that
s-
coming on Thursday next week.
Now, they may or may not, when I looked them up, I couldn't find them. I found the Colliers that was a testing organization that looked like they were industrial hygiene kind of stuff, but I don't think that was the same company. And
Well,
so,
I got received an email stating that these were the approved vendors we could contact. I just received that email last week.
okay, so you've got to get a report to us, but for sure, if you look at what you're dealing with in East Meadow, you can probably get to us and say, okay, this is where it works. We're all set here. But looking at what you're dealing with the high school, again, I'm very concerned with the food service plan. And you guys have to really look at that
Right.
and say,
I can't talk about that type of plan. That would be, I don't know if it's Nancy or principals, but I'm just trying to explain to you what we do have. So just to stay at East Meadow is brand new. You're right. It's an energy control system, which is meant to save money. I got you on that. But when they come here next Thursday, they're going to make sure everything is working the way it should be per design.
right,
Well,
now
we have-
that may in fact be not what we need, it's just per design. So that's the part that if you're looking at, that you're just gonna have to make sure that they do that they look at it not from what it was to save energy, it's to save lives.
Correct. So who's going to give us that information?
Someone with a stamp with an
No.
ASHRAE.
No, from you guys. Like, what is the Board of Health looking for?
We're looking for the engineer that's capable of giving that information. It's kind of like if you were coming to us and said, I've got this pain in my leg or in my throat. So the Board of Health is saying, well, and you want us to approve what your treatment is, and we'd be saying, hey, John, don't be asking us that. What we need you to do is go to an eye, ear, and throat guy and have him come back and say, I've analyzed this and this is what's needed for this situation.
Okay, well, then I have that next Thursday is when I get the information. They're going to be here for 2 days, 1 day at Meadow and 1 day at the high school.
Okay, so I guess you're going to come back, but I don't think Lee may be online right now. Are you, Lee?
I'm here. Yeah.
Okay, so I
Now,
guess
didn't Robert Weasel design that system at the New East Meadow? As far as the HVAC component?
I do not know.
Okay.
But someone
mean-
with expertise in this is I'm resisting moving to one of the other blocks that I have showing. But I guess what I'm going to say to you, John, is we went to McDuffie with this same issue, and McDuffie found an engineering house that has an expertise that has ASHRAE is the standards that are using, and they found that person, and certainly I think we passed on that and I'm not pushing tie and bond at all, other than the Board of Health received the thing from tie and bond saying that they have raised their level of expertise to the point that they understand what the state is looking for, what CDC is looking for, and know what the air standard. It looked to me like they were bigger than just the air part of it. But that was a company, an engineering company that says they can do all that stuff.
Yeah. Okay.
And I'm not saying to use them. It just happened that we received something in the mail because the week before, Herb had asked the question, on kind of an open-ended question to the board, saying if we're going to ask people to get that kind of expertise, who in the world do they go to? And lo and behold, 10 days later, this thing showed up. So I guess as long as Herb is saying his stuff was covered in my comments, then and you guys got them and you guys are working on them, but it sure sounded like 3 areas that are not covered right now. And your report was, 1 is the ventilation, which you claim to be working on. 2 is my concern about how are you going to be feeding these kids and protecting them during that, because we know what we're seeing is that's a high transmission time. And the 3rd is Herb saying, that why don't you use what's available in terms of, and I think the literature that Herb and I passed on to Nancy did say that they know that the outdoor teaching is extremely effective in controlling transmission. So those areas are 3 biggies. So if you guys are looking at that, it sounds like you have to move forward, but at least from me, from Dick Bombadier's standpoint, if you were asking us to certify that the Board of Health is happy with this report and with this plan, the way it is, I am going to vote no for those reasons. And, but you haven't asked for that. And it sounds like Herb has expressed his concern that he's not fully satisfied that that report covers his concerns.
Okay.
So with that, we're going to move on because we're never going to finish this. So thank you. And now we'll move. The next one is going to be for McDuffie's, which I see that we've got 3 different open panels here. I'm going to be careful with McDuffie in that the reports that we're just getting are just have arrived too late for us to really review them in detail. I can make McDuffie's, I think, to the point of saying that if the goal that we're looking for here is to allow Steve Griffin at McDuffie to be saying the Board of Health is allowing you to move forward with getting your dormitory operation, get people, let them know that it's going to happen and coming. I had issues, and I think the right people are here to probably go over the issues that I thought were the big ones were that it looked to me that that Joe Davy had not provided a plan that says for the next step of having people here, these are the 6 things that need to be done. But more than that, for their engineer to be saying, I've looked at this to the point that I can assure you that what needs to be done from at least an HVAC system can in fact be done in a manner that stays in front of the plan that McDuffie's has to get their system operational. And I did not see that. And as I said, then the next thing would be to say, this is the next step because kids are going to be coming And these things need to be completed before they arrive. And I'm looking at, certainly you've heard my little story about eating, and it's the same story, so we won't repeat it because the Granby Schools has the same issue, especially when I look at the assessment. I think that the early assessment that I thought Joe put out that said the eating areas and food prep areas were one of the problematic ventilation areas. And then also my last one with McDuffie was that I also didn't see a prophylactic testing plan in place there. In fact, there was no testing plan.
No!
Dick, let
Yes.
me interrupt for a moment. There's some extraneous stuff that's going on in somebody's area, and we're getting all kinds of nasty feedback here. So either somebody needs to mute their microphones when they're not actively involved, or get rid of the extraneous noise in their area, because it's very
That's probably a me because I'm at work. So I'm going to mute my microphone and cut in if something comes up. All right.
Okay.
Okay, let's try it. So let's see if in fact Lee is the guilty party. So I guess that I think what Andrew has said, if you're looking at the things that are the biggies in my mind, would still be HVAC. The other items I saw as procedural, but the HVAC, having Joe Davies saying, I've looked at this and this thing is doable in the time frame that we have. And second, we know what needs to be done because there are going to be kids showing up there in 2.5 weeks. So those were, and from my standpoint, the Board of Health has said, go ahead, McDuffie, you're on this path. You can continue on the path. But I saw these two things as showstoppers. If the big picture can't be met, and if the little first step can't be done and we don't know what it is. If you guys are in the spot that said, yeah, in fact, as I'm looking at you, Joe, you're probably the guy that I guess you and Steve are the guys that Joe, you need to be saying, I understand has to be done generally right now. And I've talked to my client, and my client understands what has to be done, and they're willing to do it. And for the short term, we have an action plan to be ready for these kids to implement what needs to be done at this point, so it's done before the kids show up. And if I don't know how Herb and Lee feel, but for me, those are showstoppers that if you just say, no, they're not showstoppers, that we've got the guy here that can tell you, yes, that can be done. I'm not so interested in knowing that 14 windows have to have sticks put in them and a rain shield to make sure the rain doesn't come in and their screens aren't. I don't need to know that, other than to know that there's a plan and it's going to be implemented. I don't know how you feel, Herb.
Well, I received something at 9:24 this morning, and I could not review it by now. So I'm sorry. There was lots of red line material. There was a lot of other stuff. There's no way I can comment on it.
So are you guys ready to do that?
Yeah, allow me to start, Dick, and I'm going to hand it off to some people have been working very hard on this. I think the first thing to say in that is that the engineering firm was proceeding cautiously, and obviously in the interest of time, you'd like them to turn around and warrant that we're on the right track, and yes, we can hit this. And I think they're going to be able to do so. But the first thing that they were looking for was an indicator from the Board of Health that the old drafty building model of ventilation was even a starting point. And I think what they're going to show is that if that is a starting point, that we can do it, and that we can do it for all the spaces that we need to do it for. I think all of the concerns that you've raised, we have gone down the path of addressing. I think Dr. Apleston's point is well taken. It's been addressed, but it's been addressed about 2.5 hours ago, so I understand that. I'm very interested in hearing from the rest of the team, and they're going to provide you the reassurances that you're looking for, Dick. So I'm going to turn it over, I think, to Andrew, who's going to walk you through the changes that you requested since you looked at it last, or suggested.
Okay, again, what I'm very interested is not in the details, but that the assurances that the long term is achievable, and the short term will be done before kids show up.
And as you said, you're looking for those assurances with an engineer's stamp.
That's right.
Okay, Mr. Parker.
Right. So, Dick, I've gotten your feedback and your suggestions, and we've obviously been continuing to look at CDC guidelines, DESI guidelines from the state, the ASHRAE position paper on this, and we've been working with Joe and Andrew on this quite a bit, and I really appreciate them being here today to speak to the bits that I can't, since they do have the engineer stamp. But first off, in regards to prophylactic testing, we were not able to commit to that in the first issue of our COVID response plan because we did not have an indication from our consulting physician that they were going to have tests available. We have gotten that commitment from our school physician, and we are going to use them. So we will ensure that every arriving boarding student is tested 5 days after they get here on the recommendation of the consulting physician. We are going to keep them in isolation rooms until they are tested. We are going to keep them in isolation rooms until we get their test results. So they will come into the building and immediately go into their dormitories. No, do not pass go, do not collect $200. You had mentioned the concern regarding the ventilation plan for our food service and dining areas. And I apologize that the initial documents that I started throwing out to you, Dick, and to the rest of the board were not particularly clear. So the documents that we'd initially provided showed what we could achieve with natural ventilation and open windows, and the dining hall and the kitchen areas do not have adequate window surface area for natural ventilation without mechanical means of ventilation. They do also have ventilation fans and a very large fume hood in the kitchen that were not included in the initial calculations. So that's something that's going to be recalculated. I am reasonably confident that we're going to be able to make that work to achieve the 150% of the recommended airflow in those rooms by the time we open, bar none. And if we don't, we will install additional mechanical aids to ventilation to make that happen. We've gone through and revised the building checklist. So every room has been identified, A, B, C, or unused. Any room marked A will be ready for use with mechanical ventilation aids installed by the time boarding students get here. B is the group that'll be ready for use and certified by our engineering firm by the time teachers get here. C are the rooms that are going to be used when students get here from the day population. So there is a timeline, and there are clear indicators of what we're going to have to do to modify within that plan. But from a 10,000 foot view, We and our engineers believe that we can accomplish that. I also did receive and got you a scanned signed copy of a letter from Davy Engineering that says that once we make the mechanical modifications that they recommend, they are ready, willing, and able to certify that the recommended mechanical ventilation modifications will put us in business. Did I miss anything on your list, Dick?
Probably not right now, other than we've got, again, the engineer that his stamp isn't in his hand right now. I can see it, but I know he has one. And for him to be saying, as I said, not as much as Andrew, I know you tell the best of the truth that you can tell. I'm still looking for this hard technical statement that says the engineering company has looked at this. They believe that the desired needed state can be reached, and that you guys can and will do it. And they know what needs to be done before these kids show up, and it can and will be done. That's what that's this next step that's coming. And unless we say that, then we can't move to that next step.
Well,
So the next step is saying, I'm going to be ready for the kids. And then the statement that has to come after is we're not throwing these kids at the edge of the cliff, that there is no place to go beyond that. So it's really simple right now, is for Dave to be saying, I know enough about this now that I know I'm going to be able to come up with a plan to make it safe. And I really know enough about what has to be done before the next 2.5 weeks, and that will be done. Those are the two things that I'm looking for that says you remove the two showstoppers.
Right. So it might be a good time to hear from the engineers.
That's what I would say.
so Dick, the answer to your questions is yes. Yes, we have assessed the building. Yes, we can bring these buildings and spaces to the level where it's acceptable, with the various agencies and associations are suggesting. We can meet those suggestions, and we can pretty much, I can give you the assurances that having reviewed everything and putting together the work lists, by the time the students arrive and by the time the faculty arrives, that things should be in place. And once I review them and see that the things that we've requested and the additional filtrations or partitionings or whatever that we've put together on our work list are done, then you will only at that point you will get the assurances from me that the building and facilities are ready. One of the things, Dick, though, that this building is, it doesn't have very much to lend itself in mechanical ventilation. Most of this building is reliant on natural ventilation and operable windows. And so to that end, the making sure that all the windows are functioning and operating, and that there are screens and deflectors and things in place. That's the work that primarily encompasses my work list. We find good basis for making these statements of acceptability. Recently, Harvard School of Public Health has published a guide on guidance for reopening schools. And in their matrix and in their decision trees and everything else, they have addressed buildings and schools that use natural ventilation as the means for dilution. And we are embracing and following those guidelines, as well as the ASHRAE and the others. So in many cases, this school is easier than some of the other schools. Schools that have classroom unit ventilators and mechanical systems. There's an awful lot more to witness and verify and exercise and calibrate in those environments than there are in this case. In this case, we're looking at windows and screens.
I'm not, I hate to cut you off.
Yep.
We're also on a tight schedule. I have to, I don't need to get in as you're moving into the details of why you're coming up with it. I'm really interested in you saying, I am the guy that understands it. Dick Bombardier doesn't have to understand it, but for you to be a knowledgeable guy, just as when we're talking about the pain in my throat, I don't have to be smart enough to know what little tumor has to come out and how to take it out. I just have to know that I went to the right guy that does. And your stamp gives you that right to be talking. So from my standpoint, I am willing, if Herb and Lee are willing to I don't know if they agree that saying that's good enough now that you've done your part of saying, I know what the desired future state is and we can do it. I know what needs to be done before kids show up. It will be done. I have no reason to say you guys can't continue to move forward. Herb, how and Lee, how do you feel about that?
So what sort of future assurance do we get that in fact the desired changes have been made, they've been tested, and it actually works? What is that next step, and how do we get informed?
We will remit to you the statement of assurances and certifications from Joe Davey when we receive it before students are back on campus. Your lack of receipt is our lack of compliance.
Okay. That's a serious level of demand.
And a serious level of commitment. If it's not safe to bring students back into this building and we don't have that statement of assurance, we don't want to do that either.
Okay.
Herb, I'll also say, sorry to interrupt, that I'm pretty sure that Davey Engineering can warrant a good number of our spaces already. I mean, we're talking about a few non-compliant spaces, and I think we're really close to having the spaces we need for boarding already. I mean, this is something we might be able to turn around to you in really short order. And then it's a matter of getting the warrants and the assurances for the arrival of students for in-person education. Again, our plan is to transition into that. We're going to start after Labor Day online, but once our borders are cleared quarantine and our day students have been asked to proceed with caution, we're going to be looking to bring those kids together on campus. And I'll just say we're in a bit of a special situation because we anticipate that we're going to be operating at half capacity at the start of our school year in terms of student capacity, just because the realities that we're facing. And so we have certain advantages to be able to do the kind of distancing and spacing that you're looking for.
Fine. Okay.
Yeah, I fully support all those efforts. Absolutely.
Okay, so we're gonna let you go. Steve, you can send out your letters.
Okay, I'll hit send within the half hour. I appreciate your
Okay.
time.
Thank you all.
Okay.
All
Bye-bye.
right, thank you. Bye.
You want to get the quick thing done next meeting? You want it before we get into. Now, Jean is not going to be here. Our next meeting is, I don't have my calendar. I think that the next meeting was scheduled for the 18th. What Jean Gene and I talked earlier this morning. I was hoping, I said, gee, if we keep the 18th as the date, do we pick Gene up for another meeting while she's still with us? And it looks like not. What do we want to do with the meeting? Do we want to just move it a week? The options that we do have, Gene can, in fact, listen to our meeting like she's doing right now, where she's going to be on vacation. So she could give us the 2 hours if we want to keep it on the 18th. The next option is we have the meeting without her. And then the next one is to move it another time.
How are we creating our job description, by the way? Who is doing that?
We have one that Gene sent out to all of us. That is the current job description.
But that's the Council on Aging, isn't it?
No, Jane sent one out last week on hers.
Oh, I guess somehow I missed it.
Okay. We certainly can give another one, but Lee, what's your thought? Herb, what's your thought on the meeting? Are we gonna, I don't want to have a meeting without anybody taking notes.
No, I think
Yeah,
Gene,
we've done that in the past, and it's, as you know, Dick, it's a train wreck without someone taking notes in the background.
terrible.
It's almost impossible.
So, especially, and it's even worse now, the way we're doing it with the virtual meeting. So we're not going to do that. So the question is, do we have Jean just listen for 2 hours, and when she comes back, does the minutes, or do we move it a week until she gets back?
you mean a week further along?
Yeah.
To the 25th.
To the 25th. I would suggest the 25th.
I can support that. Lee, can you?
That 25th works great.
Okay, so that's what we're gonna do. So that's
Okay.
done. Do you want to do all power right now? Al is still with us. Al and I started to talk a little bit before you got here. Do you want to do it so then he's at a spot that he can bail whenever he wants to bail, if he wants to hear us talk about Gene's replacement, or make him wait? I think we should just deal with all power.
Go for it.
Okay, then, so the issue that and Al correctly told me, hey, let's stop talking, because this is going to be a policy thing. So the issue that was on the table is we've now got a third complaint on all power. After the first complaint, I called up and they assured me that they would wear masks. And then there's another complaint that came. My suggestion to Gene was that maybe we're now at the point, especially with the disease picking up, that this time if the police come in and at first ask the police to do the spot check. If they see it, do we write a ticket? At which point Al started to say, here's what I think. And he says, I better stop saying that. So Al, maybe it's the time for you to continue your thought.
Sure. So I think we got to look at it and say, are they a retailer? If they're a retailer, then they need to be wearing masks the entire time. If they're not a retailer, then they just have to wear masks when they can't socially distance. At least that's what the order says.
And I said to Al that in my mind, without a doubt, they were a retailer, because I certainly can walk in and buy what I want. I wasn't sure if you're a retailer that's doing non-retailing stuff in the back. So if you were to go back and find the guy working alone, winterizing the outboards, that might be a different issue. But for my concern, it's the people that are in that store.
So realistically, that to your example of that guy in the back room, no one's ever going to see him, and no one's going to ever complain about him. So
I guess that's right.
that's really a non-issue. My suggestion would be this. It sounds like you had a conversation with the owner or manager, whoever that is. I'm not even sure who that is at this point. That recently bought in the last 6 months or so. I would suggest two things. I would suggest that the board serve him with a letter saying, we had this conversation, we've received more complaints. We can certainly have an officer go down there and have a conversation. And if he or she, meaning the officer, sees things that people are unmasked and they're not doing what they should be doing, they can take an enforcement action, whether it's a verbal or a written warning or a money citation. That'll be their discretion. I do think that it makes sense to progress and you had the conversation with them. That was a great way to handle it. I think a letter from the board saying, hey, we've gotten yet another. I don't know when that complaint A came in or B said that they were doing this. It could have been a week ago for all I know. But if the officers go there and they see a violation, they certainly can take an action. But I do think it's along the lines of how this should be enforced would be the Board of Health also upping the ante to give them something in writing, documenting it even.
I could support that. Maybe
The governor already sent that out to every retail business in the state, did they not, in March?
I'm not saying you send them something telling them what the regulations are. I'm saying that you send them something saying there's been repeated complaints about your business. We had a conversation on such and such a date. You said that you would comply. We've gotten another complaint. It's documenting these. So down the road, if a more strict enforcement situation has to occur, it's been documented.
I would guess it is you, Lee, that's causing the noise.
Yeah, I'm the noise. I'm just looking at the, not to be overly technical, but Wednesday, May 6th, the baker's COVID-19 order number 31 was put in place, which goes over all this stuff. I mean, not to be a zero tolerance guy, but it's already there. And I guess we should maybe, if we want to, tell everybody in town, 3 strikes, you're out. We've got the same situation at the grain store, Dollar General, etc. At some point in time, the big picture is saving people's lives and minimizing the spread of this thing. And if the businesses in town that elect not to comply, then maybe they need to get hit in the head. I don't know.
I could support if to get Al and his group on board. I could support since I think this is a long-term issue we're dealing with.
We got shit everywhere.
If we know we've got, I didn't know about the Dollar General, but if we put that on the list, but certainly 4 places that I know that are violators would be Allphase, the grain store. If you're saying we have Dollar General and Cindy's, we've had lots of complaints about those. that if what we were to send out is saying, look at that we've had the complaints, we've talked, in fact, at least 3 of them. Herb's talked to Cindy's, I've talked to the grain store and the Power, and to send a thing and say, you know, we've talked, we've got complaints now. We just want you to be aware that we're moving up to the next level, that especially with the disease starting to go up and the governor saying, you know, let's start enforcing this stuff, and say, we're putting you on notice that we are going to change. And if you're not in compliance, you are going to be the subject of enforcement action. If that's, I don't have a problem if we say, you know, all that does is push it out a week. Herb, what are you thinking?
Well, obviously, we want to live with our folks in town, and we'd like to get along. The problem is that this is not playing anymore, and the disease is serious, and transmission is serious. So I don't know, Dick. I'm of 2 minds. I'd like people to comply. I don't want to hit them over the head. Yet, if they won't comply in any other way, then I guess that's what we need to do. So I can temporize and say we send out something to those 4 businesses that seem to be the ones that have created issues, and say the next time it's probably going to get more serious. It's not just talking anymore. It's going to cost you.
If you can support that, Lee, I'm looking at the other Herb one step further. Is I've got Al over there saying, who's got to be the guy? He's the guy that's swinging the stick, and he says, you know, life can be better in his mind if we do it this way. Then why not? If we got him on board here, and he's kind of saying, you know, I'm vetoing your approach. If you can modify it a little bit, I can support it. My feeling is bring our guy on board. To listen to what he's telling us.
Can I just interrupt for a second?
Sure.
2 things. First of all, I don't understand where the board is going with the conversation in terms of we think enforcement should happen. I'm not saying that enforcement shouldn't happen. What I'm saying is documenting it and doing it in a specific way. First of all, just because somebody complains about something, that's not something that you can just enforce. If I say that Dick Bombadier's, violating something, if someone calls me tomorrow and says Dick Bombardier is speeding, I don't show up at your house with a citation.
Right.
There's got to be some evidence. There's got to be some witness to it. And I'm not saying that these things aren't happening. I can tell you though that one of the last meetings I had, I was here, that there was a complaint about the grain store. I had been to the grain store that day. Everybody was wearing a mask. My wife had been there 2 days prior. Everybody was wearing a mask. So again, my point is, if our goal is for people to comply, which it is, right? I mean, it should be. Certainly an enforcement action can be part of that. And I'm not suggesting that we shouldn't. I'm not, and to Lee, I'm not suggesting that you reiterate to people what the law is. What I'm saying is document that you've gotten complaints about their business and that you've had a conversation with the owner and he said he would comply. You know, you're kind of following this enforcement curve up, starting with the lowest piece of it and just saying, hey, this is dangerous, don't do it. And, and the last thing I'll say is the Board of Health has a stick here as well. It's not just Al Wishart and the police department. You can enforce this however you see fit. if you want to send them a citation, you have every right to do that. What I'm saying is, if we're going to do that, it makes all the sense in the world to have our road documented. You had a conversation with business A's owner or manager, said he would comply. Further complaints came in, you let them know about it, and then if you happen to see it or our officers see it, well, then you take an enforcement action. You escalate an enforcement action. I'm not at all suggesting that shouldn't happen. I'm not suggesting that you reiterate to them what the law says. I'm saying what you should do, we should do, is document what we've done and what we plan to do. That's what I'm saying.
It's not Lee, it sounds like Herb's on board that he'd go along with that. I'm on board with doing it that way. Are you saying that you don't want to do that? Or are you saying, reluctantly, maybe not the best way, but I can support it?
Yeah, I'm not trying to be a complete idiot on this thing. I just, at some point in time, I'm trying to minimize the potential bite on the residents of town. That's all there is to it. And I get the part about walking in and not seeing something, documentation. I understand that part. I mean, we can go nutty and say, okay, I want to see your security camera tapes and see what's going on. That's probably not necessary. I understand there's both sides of the issue.
Probably illegal.
But I really,
That's probably illegal.
Well, whatever. I'm just saying, I'm trying to work with everybody here, but I fear that as the numbers continue to rise, I can't understand the businesses not adhering to these laws, and not easy.
Okay, I'll give
sure.
a suggestion. If you guys let me do it, I'll write a letter. The board I'll have Gene sign it, and it'll say something to what Al's talking about, and we'll get it out to him and get it out this week so we let them know. And probably the net result will be no different, because the next time they get inspected will be probably after they get the letter.
Dick, do you want to, if it helps to expedite that, if you want to get that letter written and get a copy of it to me, I'll have one of our officers bring it down there in hand and give it to them.
I will do that.
If that's what you want.
Herb, if you want to go along with that, Lee, you want to go along with that, we can get it. And it probably carries with it a lot more importance than having them get a registered letter in the mail.
One question, Al. What is adequate documentation?
Well, I would say adequate documentation depends on exactly what you're talking about. What I'm talking about is showing that you've given them opportunity and knowledge and intent that they should be doing this. Were these complaints. So documenting what you've already given them a verbal warning, you've already given them a written warning, and now we're upping the ante. So there's that piece of documentation. The other side of it, depending on how you're looking at it, is because somebody complains doesn't mean a violation occurred.
Right.
If somebody,
sure, it just means someone complained.
Right. So, and there's a lot of misunderstanding about what the regulations are and aren't. And you don't have to look any further than our own government to understand that there's some confusion there. So, for instance, you can be out in public without a mask legally, as long as you can socially distance. Not everybody understands that. Granted, that's not the situation we're talking about, but what I'm saying is, we get complaints all the time about people, there's people at the park without masks on. Well, they're not in violation of the face covering if they're 6 feet apart. We get another one, we get called about, there's so-and-so's having a party. Well, they can have a party. Having a party isn't illegal. Those are the types of things that have to be witnessed. And so my point on the other side of documentation is actually having some evidence to back up whatever violation we're saying existed, that, you know, that it provides the basis for the enforcement action. So we need evidence. Basically, we're looking at for another one. You need evidence. So,
Well, that's what I was alluding to, Al. So we're certainly not going to be skulking around taking pictures of people, and without that, there's not much documentation that's real evidence that we could either come to ourselves or to you or anyone else and say, hey, these people are
Yep.
not in compliance.
and you can, and so can people who complain. You know, it's like anything else. Herb, if you call me or you call the police department and say, hey, it's Herb Abelson, I was just in business A, and they're not wearing masks, and you want to be a witness to that, that's documentation, that's evidence. We can use that to support something. That's not always the case, though. That's not always, forgetting about COVID, just in general, that's not always the case. Sometimes people will complain, and it could be a very valid complaint, but they don't want to go on record with it.
Right.
That situation, they're not a witness. It's not the type of thing we can rely on to back up an enforcement action. If you do have a named witness who wants to, then that can be used towards it, in terms of documenting an enforcement action.
Right.
So I'm gonna do that. I'll write the letter. I'll get it to you, Al, and we'll get the thing out, and it's gonna go. Are we sure, in my mind, are we locked in that, Lee, you talked about Dollar General? Is that really one of the places we've got that at least complaints in our file that says they did it?
Yes, I just received an email at 11:47 this morning. I sent it out to you about Dollar General.
Is that the first time or other times?
That is the second time. We did receive a phone call from a person that had been in there.
Okay, then
And that was a few weeks ago.
I'll send it to those 4 places then. Because we're not, as Al is saying, we're not charging anybody with anything. We're just saying that the ante is moved up. We've got enough complaints that I don't, in terms of Dollar General, I don't even know the way they run their operation. Who knows what's happening? They don't run it with any people. That's their business model. So okay, we will do that. So let us move on.
Can I just add along those same topic real quick? Can I add something? So one of the questions that had come up, and I think it was via email when we was getting set up for this meeting, or the one that ended up getting canceled, was the issue of tag sales. That also came up at a select board meeting, and just so this board's aware, we put something out to our officers to, if they see signs up or they go by them or anything like that, to say, look, we know that the town of Granby is not permitting or not giving permits for tag sales. So we're trying to do 2 things. We're trying to head it off at the pass before they get their, their driveway full of their stuff. And then if the officers see them, they'll stop and stop it as well. I just want to let you know that I know that came up with this board, it came up with the select board, and we're in the process of addressing that. This will be the first weekend since that occurred. So
okay.
And then the last thing, and I don't want to hijack your meeting any more than I already have, but there was something put forward by the Council on Aging relative to getting the board's blessing on a drive-through picnic. Is that something that's on your agenda for today?
You know what? It wasn't. It was on our other agenda. Have you guys read it? I read it. I've talked to Chloe about it. It sounds like there, and in fact, she modified what she was doing based on what I talked to her about. She's talking about people driving up in their cars so they're not even going to get out. I told her that I was at a restaurant on the Cape where they actually, so they wouldn't even get close to you. The person that was putting the stuff in the car actually opened the back door of the car and put the stuff on the back seat to try to make it so there's even less chance of personal involvement. And Chloe was just asking, do we support what they were trying to do? Did you guys read her plan?
I didn't see that, but I would support that.
I'm prepared to answer any questions you might have about it. That's something that we would be doing with the COA. Basically, it's going to be the substitute for our annual salt picnic, which we obviously can't do it. We couldn't make the situation safe enough to do it. So literally, we would be working this out as a substitute to that.
And I would still support that.
Thank you.
Lee, what is your thought?
Yeah, I'm completely on board with that.
Okay,
No
so
issue.
we're set with that, Al.
Okay, great. And so
Jane,
Dick,
did
you'll
you
get-
get that? That we support that?
Yes, yes, and I also want to bring up the Immaculate Heart of Mary. Instead of doing their annual picnic, they want to also do a drive-through at
So
the
it
church.
sounds to me like if they use the same model that Chloe is doing, maybe you can give them a copy of what Chloe's proposing. It
Okay.
sounds like the same model should work.
Okay, sounds great.
Just one last thing about that. The email that, or the mailing that, the information that Chloe gave you stated that we were doing it at Dufresne's Park. That's probably not going to happen. We were talking initially about that. If anything, it would just be driving through there, but we're not sure it's going to be there. We may do it either at the current Council on Aging parking lot or maybe the high school or something like that. So anyway, there was some confusion about that. That was kind of our fault because we were waiting to hear what the board had to say before we really figured out a place. So just wanted to clarify that.
My sense of that, Al, just for what it's worth, is the high school would be much better than the Council on Aging. Those entrance and exits there just are set up to bollocks the road up. So
I agree 100%. And
Yeah.
you know, the other thing I should mention too is the SALT Council is also planning a shred event, and we're hoping to do it in the high school parking lot. I haven't gotten a confirmation on that yet, but again, I didn't want this board to be blindsided by it. People would drive up, drop their stuff off, it would get tossed in a truck. They'll do it one at a time. There won't be any, you know, we'll make sure that the social distancing and mask requirements are met.
I'm okay with that.
I like those shred events. I think that is very helpful.
I like it when you're involved, Al, because I know we don't have to worry about traffic. We don't have to take care of all that stuff that we'd be telling people to be careful with.
Yeah, I don't know. You put a lot of faith in us.
Okay, are we set? Are you done with us, Al? You can stay, but it's just.
If you're all set with me, if you're all set with me, I'll just wait to get that letter from the board. And as soon as we have it, I'll make sure I get an officer over there or to whatever businesses you tell me that you want it to go to. And, you know, we'll deliver them, and, you know, hopefully that'll have a more, maybe it'll have a better impact. You know, our goal is the same as yours, is to, you know, gain compliance. So.
Yeah, it's not to get money, it's to gain compliance.
I think it will have a much bigger impact, Al. I think that's a great suggestion to have an officer deliver it.
Great. Okay.
Okay.
We have it. We'll get it out.
Okay, thanks, Al.
Thank you, guys. Have a good day.
Okay. So what we have on the table with Jean's departure is luckily Jean's saying she's willing to help us, but we've got a clock that's running, got a very, very quick set of hands on it. And basically Chris Martin told me whatever we're going to end up doing has to be advertised for a couple weeks. So what Chris Martin, they're kind of two different directions we can go on. We can go on just replace Gene, which is not just replace Gene. It would be replacing Gene's 20, I think it said it's 25 hours or 24 and a half hours of part-time work at a grade 3, and would end up with no benefits. I did, knowing also that when we lost Colleen because she needed benefits and she wanted to work with us, but she couldn't, her family life couldn't allow her to work without benefits. The next option would be to go with, if the benefits come at 27 hours a week. So what I can't tell you is whether that means they get 27 divided by 40 worth of benefits. I would expect that like vacation time is 27 hours of vacation time. However, if we back Gene's pay down or the replacement down by roughly 10%, we get the hours, since benefits are based on hours and our budget is based on dollars, you could drop the pay by, and Gene is up at the top of the pay range. You could drop their pay by 10%, which would get us up to the 27 hours. And you could get a position that had the benefits. The third thing that we've got as an option is Chris Martin suggested that we combine this position with an open position at Council on Aging that bring the position up to whatever, 35 hours or 40 hours or 30, whatever it's, but clearly up into the benefit area. And it ends up that Chris would be willing to say, because it's a broader kind of position, that he would raise it from the grade 3 that Gene's at to grade 4, which gives us some more money to work with for pay. What I found is that I talked to Gene about it, and actually I've also talked to Colleen about it, but that what Gene's concern is that privacy becomes an issue when she talks about anything that would be covered by HIPAA. And there's, of course, question about supervision. And the next thing that I found is that Colleen happens to be willing to look at this position again. And it turns out the last 3 years she's had Council on Aging experience. The final thing, when we look at part of Chris's proposal would have been to move the Board of Health operation down to Council on Aging. Now, I looking at that, I talked to Chloe about both of the issues, and Chloe assured me that from a supervision standpoint, that it would be Chloe that's the supervisor, not Chris Martin. However, when I looked at what was available for space at Council on Aging and asked Gene to look at what space Gene is using, it looked like a confidential space could probably be able to be found down at Council on Aging, But the space to do the Board of Health work is not available down there. It's just way too tight. So we're standing as I kind of look at some options that we have. I would say that we have the option of just doing it on our own, which Chris Martin also said that at the next special town meeting, we could actually say that we needed more time and more money and we wanted to be a full-time Board of Health person. But at this instant, we would have to be saying we're replacing Gene, only Gene as we see Gene. The second would be do just what Chris Martin said. Go and move it, which in my view can't work because we don't have the space. The third that I saw would be kind of a hybrid. And that would have been to say, let's kind of really replace Gene. Only the library part of Gene, we put over it as a council on aging part of Gene. So we really replace and then set it up so that the phones rang, both phones rang in both places. So the person that's doing those two jobs, in effect, can cover both positions. So that a little interruption on the Board of Health work with some council on aging could be handled, and a little interruption on the other side could be handled. And so those are what I've learned. Now the floor is Herb and Lee.
Well, I've looked at that space, and obviously the space at the Council on Aging is inadequate for the Board of Health. The amount of space that we have in our current area includes a lot of material that's upstairs and a lot of material that is in the closet, and the potential that Gene has a little more, or whomever would be sitting there would have a little more privacy where we are now than at the Council on Aging if a Board of Health question came in. So HIPAA issues do have to be recognized, but I suspect that they could be dealt with if a person were sitting at the Council on Aging and a question came up. There could be a callback, there could be whatever to ensure that HIPAA regulations were not violated. So my sense, Dick, is the more you restrict the hours on this position, the less chance you have of getting someone who can fulfill the position. So you can't get the job done if you don't provide the resources for the person that you'd like to be hired for the job. The Council on Aging, if we combined the two, would be essentially the same as Gene's job. It wouldn't be the library, it'd be Council on Aging. I think it could work if the people at the Council on Aging were reasonable. And if Chloe were the person who was supervising, maybe that works okay. What would not work is to move everything over to the Council on Aging, to the space that's now available. That, I think, is a non-starter. So I think you want as much resource as possible to be able to get the best person you can into the position. the more you restrict it, the less chance you have to get someone who's going to be able to deliver.
I 100% support that. Or Lee, what are you thinking?
Yeah, makes perfect sense. No argument at all. It seems like at least a really good starting point. As long as it's in the current footprint of our office and not down the road, then we can for sure take a hard look and go forward with that.
Okay, if that's the case, let me call Chris up and give him that proposal and see what he thinks of that. And if he says no, then we're gonna have to, well, hopefully I can get this done before we meet Monday night and we can know what we're doing. I did look, Herb, I'll send you a copy of Jean's job description, or Jean, can you send Herb another copy? Oh, you're
Yeah,
not
I
gonna,
can do that.
you're done. You're done for the week. I'll do it this afternoon, Herb.
Okay.
And
Because the Council on Aging job description, as I read it, is kind of, I mean, it's sophomoric. It is,
being charitable.
I'm being very charitable. I haven't read a lot of job descriptions of that sort, but this, I don't want to say it was a joke, because I'm sure it wasn't, and someone put the time in, but it certainly was demeaning in my estimation. Demeaning. So.
Yeah, I think I agree that when something is if you look, you're going to see it's for written communication skills, and it says able to read, and say that so obviously it's more than being able to read. But if that's the case, then let me take that. I'll take that as an assignment. I will talk to Chris. Let's see if we can close on it. If Chris closes on it, I'll talk to Chloe. I actually was going to try to combine the two job descriptions, and when I looked at them, I got exactly what Herb was talking about, that the job, it is so obvious that the person that meets the Board of Health job description meets the Council on Aging job description, that that it probably just needs one job description and say it's going to be split 2/3, 1/3 for time.
The alternative, as you suggested, is to hire someone for the Board of Health position with the understanding that we were going to the town very shortly to upgrade that position to full-time and get out of the issue of splitting with the Council on Aging and their job description, which is sort of nutty. And if we really thought we could do that, and if we really thought we could identify the right person now, I could see that as an alternative to hire.
If Colleen is and I shouldn't use Colleen, but Colleen fits exactly what you're saying, that the problem, and we kind of discussed that, and the problem is it takes someone that has a full-time pretty good job right now and says, hey, would you be willing to quit that job with the hopes that the Board of Health is going to be successful? And they have to lay a lot on the line that Herb, if we were going to try that, I think I would be proposing that we try to do something like use Kelly Services and I'll call them Kelly Services, but a contract person to try to cover us until we get our ducks in order. But
And when would that be? When would be the next time that this job could be upgraded to the point where benefits would accrue with the job without having to split it with some other part of the town?
Chris, in keeping with that discussion, said to me that he thought it could be handled at an October special town meeting. However, when I talked to Kathy, Kathy said I shouldn't say what she said, but what she did say is thinking that there was going to be a special town meeting in October and having her trying to manage that with a national election that's going to have zillions of mail-in ballots coming up. She says it's just insane to be thinking that she can manage that. So it's probably going, Kathy said, at least until after election, which, so realistically, it's probably after the first of the year.
Yeah. Well, that to me is taking the timeline out maybe too far. But if in fact we go with this hybrid model and the hybrid model doesn't work well, what is the chance that you can get out of it?
Well, I think my feeling is that we absolutely could get out of it, because more than likely the solution would be that the person that's got the hybrid job would be the one that ends up applying for the full-time job, and it just puts the council on aging back to where they are right now. But
yes, almost surely that's the case. I'd go with the hybrid model now.
so Lee, that's what I'm going to do if you agree, and we'll give it a shot.
Makes the most sense at this point, absolutely.
Okay, so that's what we do. So we're set. We're done, and we'll talk again on Monday night.
Okay.
Bye, Herb. I'll get you
Have
that
a good
thing.
meeting.
Okay,
I'll
Thank
get
you,
that
everybody.
right away to you, Herb.
Thank
Bye.
you.